Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian. So I'm in a good mood. We're gonna dunk on people today. We got a lot of dunking going on. Okay, the dunking's still right ahead. And then afterwards, stick their lawn. We got giant primaries tonight. Fetterman in Pennsylvania, Booker in Kentucky, Erica Smith in North Carolina. We got a lot more. Jamie McLeod-Skinner in Oregon, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, North Carolina. These are giant primaries. By the way, we could walk away with a couple of progressives extra in Congress today. No joke, okay? And some of them are actually favored. What is this? And as we all know, don't count your chickens before they hatch. So that's right after the Young Turks. No bonus episode today. We're going straight into election coverage. In fact, Kentucky polls have just closed. Okay, results from that later in the program. God bless. Let's go forward, Casper.
We begin with an update on how Tucker decided to cover the Buffalo shooting.
Within minutes of Saturday's shooting, before all of the bodies of those 10 murdered Americans had even been identified by their loved ones, professional Democrats had begun a coordinated campaign to blame those murders on their political opponents. They did it, they said, immediately. Patron Gendron was the heir to Donald Trump, they told us. Trumpism committed mass murder in Buffalo. And for that reason, it followed logically, we must suspend the First Amendment.
That was Tucker Carlson responding to the racially motivated mass shooting that took place in Buffalo, New York. And he covered it the way that anyone with a functioning brain could have expected him to cover it. Essentially, refusing to take any responsibility for the rhetoric that he pushes on his show in regard to white replacement theory, and also finding ways to twist himself into a pretzel to somehow blame the left for that tragic shooting, which again was racially motivated based on conspiracy theories that are shared by people like Tucker Carlson on his show regularly. The notion that white people in America are being replaced by people of color. That was what the shooter in this case was concerned about. He made that abundantly clear in his 180-page manifesto. Now, there were other lies in that cold open that we showed you guys, including the idea that now Democrats are using this as an excuse to take our First Amendment rights away from us, which is insane. I will agree, though, that there are some Democratic politicians who keep repeating that the First Amendment doesn't protect hate speech. That is not true. The First Amendment does in fact protect hate speech, but it does not protect certain forms of speech, including incitements toward violence. The example that gets given all the time about the limitations of the First Amendment, of course, Cenk, is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. But before we get to more clips of Tucker Carlson essentially placing the blame on anyone other than himself, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, there's two really important points that I want you to note as we do this coverage. So as usual, it's a sleight of hand that Tucker Carlson does. The guy writes a 180-page manifesto about how he hates non-white people, black people, Latinos, etc., and says, I'm going to murder them because of this racist ideology. It is crystal clear. There's 0% doubt about it. Then Tucker Carlson comes on there and goes, can you believe they're talking about race?
It's amazing. But really
wait a minute, the guy who did the shooting said, I'm doing it because of race. If we left race out of the story, we would be lying to you. He did it because it was cloudy? No, he wrote 180 pages on why he did it. So he's saying the minute they accurately cover the story, they're making it about race, And they're making it about politics. The guy clearly wrote, I want to change the political dynamic of this country by making sure that people do not immigrate here and that white people are still in charge. So that's the first sleight of hand. The second sleight of hand is he makes it seem like everyone on the left is against all speech.
Right.
So the actual speech here that is relevant, by the way, as Anna pointed out, so that both the right and the left get it right in terms of the politicians, right? No, the speech we're talking about that's problematic is incitement towards violence. That is not legal. If you want to say, look, I hate all black people, I hate Muslims, Jews, whatever, yes, you have a right to say that in America. But you do not have a right to say, now let's go kill them.
Right.
Okay, and that's the other sleight of hand. He makes it sound like, oh, everyone on the left wants to ban all speech because we're worried about incitement as speech. And so just be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, that's a great point, a good distinction. One other thing I want to address about the first video we showed you. It's interesting that he claims that this is like all part of the Trump derangement syndrome, how everyone's focused on Trump and how Trump incited this and he's an heir to Donald Trump. No, Tucker, I know you're fully aware that people have actually been hyper-focused on you and the rhetoric you use on your show. Actually, shockingly, this is one of the few cases where it hasn't really been about Trump. It has been about the kind of conspiracy theories that he peddles, Tucker Carlson peddles on his own show.
See, that's such a great point. That's another sleight of hand. And I realize now that every time I mention sleight of hand, I do this. That's like for 3-card Monty. 3-card Tucker, he's moving the cards around, right? Yes. Wait, this wasn't about Trump. This was about you, Tucker Carlson, but by saying they're coming after Trump, one, he gains the loyalty of his audience who loves Donald Trump, and two, he makes it seem like it's Donald Trump's problem, not his problem. He might even run against Donald Trump at some point, so that's kind of a genius card trick there that he just pulled on you.
Exactly. Now, he sets up his segment on the Buffalo shooter by claiming that, it's just a deranged guy. He didn't really have an ideology, he just has mental health issues. Let's watch.
Gendron was mentally ill. Everyone around him knew that, including his teachers and the local police. Less than a year ago, Gendron was committed to a mental hospital after threatening to murder his classmates at a school graduation ceremony.
So Gendron in his manifesto makes it clear, because he knows that people are gonna accuse him of having mental issues or mental health issues or illnesses, that he is not mentally ill. He makes that clear. He acknowledges that in the manifesto. Now some might say, well, I mean, he's a lunatic who's saying all sorts of things in a crazy manifesto. Why do you believe him? You don't have to believe him. But notice that Tucker Carlson, the evidence that he provides is Gendron getting in trouble in school less than a year ago, where he threatened to do a murder-suicide. Now remember, when we covered this story, we were very detail-oriented. We told you he was an overall seemingly normal guy until he became radicalized in early 2020 through these message boards like 4chan, for instance. Let me read you one quick portion of the manifesto where he talks about this. He wrote, I started browsing 4chan in May of 2020 after extreme boredom. Remember, this was during the outbreak of COVID. There, I learned through infographics and memes that the white race is dying out and that the Jews and the elite were behind this.
Okay, so another sleight of hand. Man, this 3-card Tucker is good. So now he says, can you believe that they think that this is about politics and race when the guy's obviously mentally ill? And we're being honest about that, but they made it political. I mean, you've never seen us do that. We haven't on Fox News. When 9/11 happened, nobody talked about the mental illness of anybody. Anytime when the Sacramento shooter, there was a Muslim shooter in Sacramento, there was a Muslim shooter in Orlando. This is over the last 20 years, right? Every time, no one on Fox News talked about mental illness. Now, were they unhinged? Yeah, the guy in Orlando, obviously unhinged. And many of them were, of course, right? But Fox News did what on day one? Muslims, terrorists, invade. After 9/11, they said invade, invade, invade. They made it political on minute 1 and never talked about mental illness. Now, an interesting person in I don't know if it's a middle ground or whatever it is, but the Unabomber. The Unabomber also had a manifesto. When you do a manifesto, it is devoutly political. Dylan Roof also had one, right? And so you are declaring, I am not mentally ill. And by the way, you don't have to take their word for it. They're all at least a little troubled, right, to say the least.
Right.
But clearly they think they're doing it for a political reason. And the Unabomber, obviously a touched dude living in a cabin in Montana by himself, writing crazy manifestos, but he had a political motive for the bombings, right? And that is obvious. Can I tell you something? Having read now a lot of right-wing ideology and philosophy, they're now a new group called the New Right thinks the Unabomber is a hero.
Yeah.
They've like a portion of the right wing has and not an insignificant portion, not a fringe, like a giant portion, has lost their goddamn minds.
Yeah. So let me give you more from Tucker's attempts to essentially pivot or take all the blame away from the very people who are emphasizing the very ideology and the very conspiracy theories that motivated this tragic mass shooting. In the next video, he specifically misrepresents the shooter's manifesto, which again, I read for myself. So let's hear what Tucker has to say. And then you know what? We'll actually give you excerpts from the actual manifesto. Let's watch.
What he wrote does not add up to a manifesto. It is not a blueprint for a new extremist political movement, much less the potential inspiration for a racist revolution. Anyone who claims that it is lying or hasn't read it. Instead, Gendron's letter is a rambling pastiche of slogans and internet memes, some of which flatly contradict one another. The document is not recognizably left-wing or right-wing. It's not really political at all. The document is crazy. It's the product of a diseased and organized mind.
Now he mentions, the document isn't really left-wing or right-wing, and I think it would be a mistake to try to take this manifesto and fit it into some neat box in terms of, the partisan politics that we have in America. There were portions of it where he's talking about crypto, for instance, but the one thing that was consistent throughout the entirety of the manifesto was his belief that white people were being replaced by people of color in America, and that white people needed to rise up and do something about it, to purge people of color from the country, even if that meant murder. And as you can see from his own actions, he meant it. So let's go to the excerpts from the actual manifesto, since Tucker Carlson thinks we're all dweebs who haven't read it. Now he writes, the shooter here, when he asks himself, he answers questions that he can predict people are gonna ask him, like, why did you decide to carry out the attack? I carried out the attack to show to the replacers that as long as the white man lives, our land will never be theirs and they will never be safe from us. To directly reduce immigration rates to European lands by intimidating and physically removing the replacers themselves. To intimidate the replacers already living on our lands to emigrate back to their home countries.
Sounds so left-wing, Anna. I can't tell. Is he left-wing or right-wing? I don't. By the way, everyone on social media, every right-winger on social media today is like, no, he's actually a left-winger.
Yeah, of course.
They're the easiest people in the world to brainwash because they want to be brainwashed.
But Cenk, they're not it's not that they're brainwashed. It's that they know what's happening and they're providing cover for what's happening. We need to stop making the mistake of assuming that they're all morons who don't know what's going on. They spew the same garbage conspiracy theories themselves, and then when things pop off, when there's an act of violence, you think that they want to take responsibility for it? They're not gonna take responsibility for it.
I mean, at a minimum, they're the most disingenuous people you'll ever meet. Yeah, the people on the left all hate immigrants and black people. And that's why we hate critical race. Wait, what?
You know what the shooter did in the middle of this massacre? You know what he did? He's specifically targeting black people in the supermarket. At one point, he comes across a white person in the supermarket. He had his gun drawn at that individual and realizes he's white. You know what he did? He apologized to him and kept moving.
All right, name one person, if you're a right winger out there, name one person on the left who says we should shoot black people but not white people. One person on the left. You'll never find that person because nobody believes that. That's not a left-wing position. It is the exact opposite of a left-wing position. How do you guys say that all the time? Oh, you guys like black people too much. Yo, you're trying to give them all the advantages, huh? And now you turn around and say left people want to kill black people? Are you insane? They're just such giant liars.
A few more excerpts from the manifesto. And by the way, the reason why I read excerpts from the manifesto is because the media, like the so-called nonpartisan corporate media, they want to avoid providing any coverage of it. They don't want to in any way emphasize this ideology. But when you don't give people the details of what the manifesto says, it provides an opportunity for the smear merchants, for the liars, the disinformation merchants, people like Tucker Carlson, to lie about what's in the manifesto. So let me give you more. He says that the attack was to agitate the political enemies of my people into action, to cause them to overextend their own hand and experience the eventual and inevitable backlash as a result, to incite violence, retaliation, and further divide between the European people and the replacers currently occupying European soil. Most of all, it was to spread awareness to my fellow whites about the real problems the West is facing and to encourage further attacks that will eventually start the war that will save the Western world, save the white race, and allow our humanity to progress into more advanced civilizations. And he was also answering the question about whether or not this was an anti-immigration attack, anti-immigration in origin. He says, yes, beyond all doubt, anti-immigration, anti-ethnic replacement, and anti-cultural replacement. I can think of one show, a prominent show, that spews this on a nightly basis, and that's Tucker Carlson's show. If you don't believe me, we've got the receipts on that as well. We can go back to that.
All right, so Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro are a hilarious joke. Ben Shapiro also, this is the woke left. Oh, how can this be the woke left? You guys are self-parody, man. You guys are you make fools of yourselves every single day. Okay, but guys, that quote that Anna read you is so important about how he says to agitate the political enemies of my people into action, meaning, hey, when I shoot and murder people, they're gonna have to take action. To cause them to overextend their own hand, meaning like they're gonna try to fight back against the scourge that I've unleashed. And hence they're gonna wanna say, hey, maybe we shouldn't have things like automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons, assault rifles, and maybe not incitements to violence specifically. And then experience the eventual and inevitable backlash as a result. And the backlash is what Tucker just did, we just showed you. The Democrats are overextending their hand. Now they're going against all speech. Can you believe it? Tucker Carlson is doing the manifesto. He's doing the very next step that the shooter outlined should happen. And then he claims, I can't tell if it's right wing or left wing. Dude, if you're doing what's in the manifesto, it might be right wing, okay? Unless all of a sudden Tucker's gonna claim he's left wing.
Listen, and Tucker, of course, has an incentive in avoiding any blame, right? Because we've all seen his show. In fact, I'd like to remind you all of what his show looks like, sounds like, and how similar it is to significant portions of this manifesto by the Buffalo shooter. Let's watch.
I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true. We've never seen demographic change like this. It's roughly the equivalent of a brand new city of Chicago every year. A city populated entirely by poor people with limited education who can't speak English. And the question is, how is it good for America? Where exactly is all this criminal white supremacy, this right-wing domestic terrorism that poses, quote, the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland? Where is it? Well, of course, it doesn't exist. In other words, you're being replaced and there's nothing you can do about it. So shut up. The great replacement theory, it's a lie, they yelled. George Soros has nothing to do with that. Stop talking. They said we were espousing something called the great replacement theory, a well-known racist fantasy, the great replacement. They acknowledge that it's real and they love it. This policy is called the great replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. The great replacement plan is working.
And that was just a small fraction of the segments that he has done on the replacement theory. He has talked about this literally hundreds of times on his program.
Okay, now I told you earlier, this is not a fringe movement, unfortunately, in the Republican Party. Now I'm gonna tell you a poll They read this question to Republicans, and I'm gonna tell you what percentage said yes. They asked, do you believe that a group of people in this country are trying to replace native-born Americans with immigrants who agree with their political views? 47% of Republicans said yes. That is nearly half of all Republicans saying, yeah, a group of people, usually the Jews in their theories, conspiracy theories, are trying to replace native-born Americans with immigrants. That is exactly what the shooter thought. That is exactly what Tucker Carlson says on his air. And voila, nearly half of Republicans believe that. This is massively dangerous. And he asked in that middle of that clip, oh, they talk about domestic terrorism. Where is it? Well, congratulations, Tucker. There it is. And by the way, it was there too in El Paso, Texas, when the guy talked about great replacement theory, and 2 other synagogue shootings, one in Southern California and one in Pittsburgh, where both shooters talked about the white replacement theory. And they shot synagogues because they thought the Jews were doing it.
Tucker knows what he's doing. His audience knows what he's doing. And what I'm fearful about is that it's just another day in America. It's just another racially motivated mass shooting. One side is trying to get to the bottom of what the real motivations were, and the other side denies any responsibility while simultaneously continuing to spew the same talking points, the same ideology that fuels this garbage and this violence. My fear is it's just gonna be the same response and the same do nothing attitude by people who pretend to be concerned about this after the shooting happens. And we'll see how it's gonna play out. You know, my predictions unfortunately tend to be correct, as Cenk knows.
Hashtag Anna was right.
We gotta take a break. When we come back, Tucker Carlson was asked, I'm sorry, Joe Biden was asked whether Tucker Carlson is responsible. You wanna see his response. Let's take a break. We'll come back with that and more.
All right, back on Young Turks, Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian. Go.
There's more to get to when it comes to the Tucker Carlson segment from last night, so let's get right to it.
Most painful and destructive of all, Biden is likely to use racial wounds in order to make his point. There is no behavior worse than this. All race politics is bad, no matter what flavor those politics happen to be. No race politics is better than any other. All of it is poison. Race politics subsumes the individual into the group. It erases people. It dehumanizes them. Race politics elevates appearance over initiative and decency and all the other God-given qualities that makes every person of every color unique, yet morally equal to every other person.
Believe it or not, that was a prominent race baiter and peddler of the white replacement theory, Tucker Carlson on Fox News, essentially warning President Joe Biden to avoid mentioning the issue of race when addressing a racially motivated mass shooting that took place in Buffalo, New York. Now, that was a shooting involving an 18-year-old who was inspired by conspiracy theorists who believe that white people are being replaced by people of color in America and that something needs to be done about it, something violent needs to be done about it. And Tucker Carlson didn't like the fact that people were calling out his own rhetoric on his show where he peddles the same conspiracy theory that inspired the shooter. And maybe he was a little concerned that maybe Joe Biden would grow a pair for once in his life and call out the actual bad actors in this case. But he probably doesn't know Joe Biden well enough. We do, and his response was exactly what you would expect. Let's watch.
Do you believe that certain members of Congress, the Republican Party, as well as Tucker Carlson, who have echoed the replacement theory, deserve some blame for violent deaths?
I believe anybody who echoes the replacement is to blame, not for this particular crime, but it's for no purpose except profit and or political benefit. And it's wrong. It's just simply wrong.
So Cenk, I don't know, am I being a little too harsh with Joe Biden? Because he does place some blame on Tucker Carlson for profiting off of peddling this toxic conspiracy theory which motivates violent people to carry out racially motivated mass shootings. But he doesn't want to blame Tucker Carlson at all for the shooting that just happened that was inspired by the same theories that Tucker Carlson spews on his show regularly.
Honestly, you got a lot more out of it than I did. I thought that was jibber jabber.
Really?
Yeah, I could barely understand what he was saying. He's like, I don't blame him or the crime or something for replacement theory, but I blame somebody for coming up with a profit. Speak clearly, man. Look, the one thing you got to give Trump is he speaks clearly. Now, he might speak like a moron and he might say things like wind causes cancer, wing, wing, right? But when he says something, he says it 2-3 times. And it's by the end, whether right or wrong, you're super clear on what he means by it, right? He's like, I'm the one who created the record economy, right? And you know what he's saying. With Biden, he's like, yeah, you need to profit. What?
Okay, so let me read you a transcript of what he said. I believe anybody who echoes replacement theory is to blame, not for this particular crime.
Yes, for that particular crime, yes.
But it's for no purpose except profit and or political benefit, and it's wrong. So he's arguing, no, I mean, I don't blame them for inspiring this crime, but they do spew the same ideology on their programming, which is done for profit.
You had to read it a second time, and with you reading it instead of him mumbling it, for people to even understand.
Listen, I mean, we don't disagree. The Democratic leadership, and that includes the President of the United States, are terrible communicators, terrible legislators, and have failed the American people and their voters over and over again. There's no disagreement on that.
100%. So that then comes back to the original question of, okay, was Tucker right? So Tucker says, now, this crime, don't worry about race in regards to the crime. He says racial politics is the worst thing you've ever seen.
Except racial politics is all he talks about on his show.
And by the way, I'm gonna get to that, but the crime was about racial politics. So then he says, anyone talking about the crime in the lens of racial politics, I wrote it down, no behavior is worse than this. How about killing 10 people? That seems worse, doesn't it?
I would say that's worse.
Yeah, I mean, so he's like, don't worry about the crime. Don't worry about the 10 dead people. Don't worry about that he wrote a giant manifesto saying, I like to kill black people. That is not the problem. The biggest problem, he says, is people criticizing that ideology. Really, that's the biggest problem?
The biggest problem is making this about race when this was about race.
You know who made it about race, you moron? And I know he's not stupid, to be fair. He thinks his audience is stupid and that he's gonna be easily able to trick them. The guy who made it about race is the guy who shot 10 black people while writing a manifesto saying, I hate black people, I really like white people. Here's 180 pages of me saying that. And for Tucker to say, I can't believe the Democrats made it racial. Oh, shut up. By the way, do Democrats make some things racial? Yes, we've talked about it on the show. Yep. But you could not find a worse example. Not on this.
You know what Democrats
literally can't talk about this story without talking about race. But he says, no, the people talking about this story accurately are the real problem. Okay, no, you're the real problem, Tucker, because you're the one who makes every story racial, to Anna's point. Now you want to talk about, they're telling everybody what I do on a nightly basis. It's so unfair. Just because I said native-born Americans are better, that diversity is bad, that immigrants are dirty. These are all things he said. That on Fox News constantly, we have people like Newt Gingrich coming out talking about classic Americans are better and immigrants from non-European countries are bad. Tucker Carlson said the worst thing that ever happened in this country was the repeal of a 1965 law that said that we could only take immigrants from Europe. He said that was the worst thing that ever happened in this country. We didn't make it racial, Tucker. You did, over and over and over and over again. And the minute that anyone actually defends black people, minorities, immigrants in this country, you go, I can't believe you made it racial.
You know, the whole point is to intimidate people who want to tell the truth about what's going on in this country, to prevent them from speaking the truth, to essentially clear the way for one narrative to be shared over and over again. And that's the narrative that you get from, honestly, either white supremacists or white supremacist enablers like Tucker Carlson, right? Because, I mean, it's inconvenient for Tucker Carlson. It's so inconvenient that a mass shooter was inspired by the garbage he spews on his show on a regular basis. It's inconvenient. So please don't address that. It makes him very uncomfortable. He needs a safe space so he can continue spewing the same toxic, dangerous rhetoric night after night with no problem. That's what the reality is. Now, Tucker Carlson's one side of this. The other side is the delusional people who identify as conservative or part of the Republican Party who apparently they're having an identity crisis. They don't realize what the Republican Party stands for anymore. So let's get to Ben Shapiro.
What the left is trying to do is broaden out the term great replacement theory to include any sort of normal concerns about illegal immigration, any suggestions that demographic voting patterns make a difference, which of course, everybody both left and right knows that they do.
That was Ben Shapiro, who dismissed criticism from the left regarding the Buffalo shooting that left 10 people dead over the weekend. And that shooting was racially motivated. The racial motivation was white replacement theory. The belief that white people are being replaced by people of color in the country, and the individuals who believe in this want to purge America of people of color, so this will become a white ethno-state. Now, Ben Shapiro is under the impression, it's unfortunate, that the mainstream Republican Party doesn't believe in this, that mainstream Republican voters don't believe in this. And he is mistaken, and I'll give him the evidence in just a minute. But first, let's hear a little more from Ben Shapiro.
If you want to talk about the great replacement theory and what this person actually thought, you have to actually read the manifesto, and you actually have to know what the great replacement theory is. The great replacement theory is the theory that essentially there are a bunch of Jewish elites, and this coterie of Jewish elites wishes to pervert the racial stock of a country like the United States, a predominantly white country, in order to weaken the country from within. That is the great replacement theory. It is not concerns about illegal immigration. It is not concerns about cultural assimilation. The great replacement theory is the idea there can never be cultural assimilation. The great replacement theory is the idea that racism, that race is destiny. In fact, the racial essentialism of great replacement theory looks a lot more like wokeism than it does like mainstream conservatism or mainstream liberalism. Neither of the two major Democratic parties is a believer that simply because you are of a particular race, this means that you are inherently genetically designed in order to vote a particular way. That is relegated to the wokest left, and it's relegated to the white supremacist right.
You know, it is impressive how every conservative in the country can somehow weave in the word woke or wokeism in any political issue, even when it has nothing to do with so-called wokeism. What are you talking about? How is this in any way tied to wokeism? We're talking about a guy who wrote a 180-page manifesto, of which I read every word, including all the weaponry stuff he had toward the end, and there is nothing in there that's woke, not even close to woke.
No, but Anna.
Wokeism? How is this wokeism?
No, but it's the exact opposite. Wokeism is, hey, understand the institutional racism that happened in this country and the discrimination that minorities have had to suffer. This guy says, let's kill the minorities.
That's exactly right.
If anything, it's sleepism. I mean, it's the very exact opposite of wokeism. But it doesn't matter. Both Shapiro and Tucker Carlson have realized their audience is filled with wall-to-wall schmucks. They could tell them anything and they would believe it. And so all they have to do is blame anything on the left and anything on wokeism.
They're not schmucks. They believe in it. They believe in it, Cenk. They believe in the replacement theory. I think Ben Shapiro does represent old school Republican ideology. Okay, I do think that. I think that he has, in some ways, provided cover for the most nefarious elements of the current Republican Party. But I think overall, he finds all of this stuff pretty horrendous. And by the way, the manifesto included a photo of Ben Shapiro calling him a Jewish rat.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure Shapiro does not subscribe to this garbage. Okay, so I wanna be fair to him. But at the same time, he's also delusional about where the Republican Party is right now, and he needs to wake up about that. Okay, so he wants to say that like this is because he's different from Tucker Carlson in that he rejects this, he rejects white replacement theory, and believes that it is not in any way indicative of the current mainstream Republican Party. That is not true. It is, and we have evidence of that.
Yeah. No, look, I don't know if Ben Shapiro is a master at lying to himself or lying to his audience, okay? But when you say he doesn't believe in the replacement theory, I totally agree, okay? Because the replacement theory says the Jews did it. Ben is not that nuts, okay? He is not anti-Semitic, obviously, okay? And not just because he's Jewish, but because of all the things that he has said, okay? So you could say a lot of things about Ben, but that's not among them. Okay, but does he aid and abet those monsters? Definitely.
Okay, we agree.
Definitely.
On that. We agree on that. We agree on that.
And so he says he tells himself pretty little lies. He said right there, and he tells his audience lies all the time. Oh, neither major party is in favor of this. Wait a minute. First of all, the Southern strategy was the Republican Party about 50 years ago saying, oh, the Democrats passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Now a lot of racists in the South are disgruntled with the Democratic Party, so we are going to go try to get those white racist voters in the South. It's the Southern strategy. Two different heads of the Republican Party have apologized for an avowedly racist strategy that they did. So don't come tell us that the two parties are the same and neither one is racist. That's a flat out lie. And Ben knows that. He covers for Republican racism thinking, oh, it won't blow back on me. Well, ask your friend Dave Rubin if you get blowback or not from the vicious racists and bigots that you actively support every single day.
So let's get to what Republican voters believe today, specifically about replacement theory. Okay, Republican voters. This is based on an Associated Press NORC Center poll for Public Affairs. And here's what we know. Let's take a look at this graph. So it shows that these numbers represent individuals who either strongly agree or are extremely concerned, or somewhat agree and are somewhat concerned that white people are being replaced in the country. Okay, there is a group of people in this country who are trying to replace native-born Americans with immigrants who agree with their political views. Notice that the number is very high for Republican voters, about 47%, nearly 50% of whom believe that white people are being replaced with people of color, okay? By the way, let me just be clear about one other thing. The number is uncomfortably high for me when it comes to Democrats. That's a pretty disgusting and significant portion of Democrats who tend to believe the same thing. So I don't want to leave that alone. I want to make sure we talk about that as well.
For our podcast audience, I just want to be clear. Overall, Democrats are about 22% believe that theory, which is stunningly high.
Right.
Overall, it's about 32% of all Americans. That's a third of all Americans who believe this, like, ridiculously racist theory, and nearly half, 47% of Republicans fully believe this viciously racist conspiracy theory. And by the way, viciously anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And Ben Shapiro comes on and does cover for them and goes, oh, look away, don't worry about the anti-Semitism. It doesn't exist, It's just a minor little fringe thing. No. Ben, half of your audience believes it.
Okay, so let me give you more, because it's always important to take a step back and look at overall trends, right? Rather than just point to anecdotal evidence. Now that we've shown you a poll giving you that trend, let's go to anecdotal stuff, all right? So Matt Gaetz is a pretty prominent Republican lawmaker, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so one person who loves to spew the white replacement theory regularly is Tucker Carlson. Last year, Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz defended Tucker Carlson spewing that rhetoric on his show. Let's go to graphic 3 here. Tucker Carlson is correct about replacement theory. He used the words as well as he explains what is happening to America. The Anti-Defamation League is a racist organization, he argues. And then you have Elise Stefanik, who's another Republican lawmaker out of New York, who had political ads just saying the same garbage. So a series of Facebook ads published in September of 2021 by Stefanik's campaign committee charged that Democrats were allowing undocumented immigrants into the US as a ploy to outnumber and eventually silence Republican voters. And here's what her ad said specifically: radical Democrats are planning their most aggressive move yet, a permanent election insurrection, reads one of the ads, which shows a reflection of migrants in sunglasses Biden is wearing. Their plan to grant amnesty to 11 million illegal immigrants will overthrow our current electorate and create a permanent liberal majority in Washington. She knew what she was doing with that rhetoric as well. Come on.
As we've said 100 times, why don't you actually try to win over immigrant voters? The reason why they don't want to win over immigrant voters is because the Republican Party is for white people. Otherwise, you'd say, oh, Catholic Latinos coming into the country, who a lot of them are conservative by nature, looking for economic opportunity, that when I came to the country, we were Republicans because of that ideology. Why am I no longer a Republican? They drove us away with a stick. They said, we hate all Muslims. We want to ban all of them from the country. Well, how the hell are we supposed to stay in a party that despises us? So it would be so easy for Republicans to get so many immigrant voters, but they don't want them because they're an all-white party. They want just white power. And so when Ben Shapiro says outrageous lies, like you saw in that clip when he says, no, the replacement theory isn't about illegal immigration. Come on, man. That is such a ridiculous, outrageous lie.
And let's also address the fact that when the Trump administration was doing away with the legal means to immigrate to the United States, Ben Shapiro had no problem with that. In fact, he was very supportive of that. So doing away with forms of legal immigration and then turning around and going after illegal immigration. I mean, what do you think the whole objective is there?
Yeah, by the way, I mean,
to prevent immigration into the country, period. Do away with the legal means and then, do what you can to stop them coming in illegally as well. And then that stops immigration into the United States. Gee, I wonder why.
To show you how absolutely despicably craven Ben Shapiro is, after Donald Trump said about the Nazis who chanted, "The Jews will not replace us," Shapiro was mad, okay? And Shapiro said, no, this is bad, etc. And then Trump said there are good people on both sides, the Nazi side and the non-Nazi side. And you know what Shapiro did? Oh, all my money's coming from right-wingers who hate Jews. Sure, yes, of course, Trump is great. Trump is great. You pathetic human being.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, Jimmy Dore officially endorses Donald Trump. We'll come right back with that story and more.
All right, Cenk, Anna, and Cadillac Desert. They just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. We appreciate it. Anna.
Let's get to our next story.
So if you were the anti-war person, you should have voted for Trump and the Republicans. That's what this means. If you're pro-war, you vote for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
I was trying to save abortion. That's why I voted for Biden.
Wow, that laugh at the end seemed genuine. That was Jimmy Dore endorsing Donald Trump as the anti-war option if he ends up running for re-election, I guess, which is fascinating because I remember the Trump presidency rather clearly. I remember his foreign policy rather clearly. And we'll get to Biden in just a minute. But before we do, let's just refresh Jimmy Dore's short memory span with who Donald Trump really was when it came to foreign policy during his first term in office.
The American military dropped the mother of all bombs, literally, that's its name. The bomb dropped today on an ISIS tunnel complex in Afghanistan is the most powerful non-nuclear explosion ever in warfare. After the bombing, President Trump suggested the weapon's use says a lot about his administration.
We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization.
So if you were the anti-war person, you should have voted for Trump and the Republicans.
President Trump is giving the CIA significantly more authority in carrying out drone strikes.
The strike killing Soleimani was a major escalation in the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Up until now, that campaign largely relied on crippling economic sanctions. So how do we get from economic pressure to military might?
Donald Trump has wielded his power of veto. this time to block a resolution which aimed to end US military assistance to the Saudi coalition fighting Iran-backed rebels in Yemen.
So if you were the anti-war person, you should have voted for Trump and the Republicans.
The president pulls me aside on at least a couple occasions and suggests that maybe we have the US military shoot missiles into Mexico.
Shoot missiles into Mexico for what?
He would say to go after the cartels.
The anti-war president? By the way, that video that we put together also didn't include the fact that the Trump administration attempted coups in Venezuela on multiple occasions. Luckily, Trump and his administration was insanely incompetent and they failed in doing those coups. But that's who Donald Trump was. I remember very clearly how terrible he was in foreign policy. Just because he had rhetoric indicating that he wanted to pull troops or withdraw troops doesn't mean that he actually succeeded or really wanted those things. In fact, he has more negative marks on his foreign policy record than positive marks. And we'll get to Biden in a minute. But Cenk, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Trump is the peace president that we all need.
Yeah, remember when he said, we're not only gonna kill the terrorists, but we're gonna kill their families. And he, by the way, he followed through on that. A significant rise in civilian deaths under Donald Trump's bombings of foreign countries than even under Obama, and Obama was pretty terrible at it. So Trump came in and started killing civilians at a much higher rate, bombing all over the world. And Jimmy thinks that's the anti-war candidate?
In fact, the Trump administration stopped reporting on the number of civilian deaths that came as a result of the drone strikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, tell me that you become a right winger and your entire audience is right wing and you get paid by the right wing without telling me that. So Trump is anti-war. Look, you want to criticize the Democratic Party, there's plenty to criticize. But you also should be, by the way, correct on all the facts. For example, as we transition to Biden, who did get us out of Afghanistan? Oh, right, Biden did.
Yeah. Well, okay, so what sparked that commentary, that expert commentary from the intelligent Jimmy Dore? The fact that Biden has decided to deploy hundreds of troops to Somalia, which I think that's a totally fine thing to criticize him on. I would criticize him on that. But to ignore Trump's foreign policy and make him out to be the peace president is unbelievably dishonest. But he is speaking to a right-wing audience, and so I'm not surprised by it at all. Now, just to give you some details on what's going down in Somalia, the US will reposition US forces in East Africa and move to restore the US military presence in Somalia in consultation with the Somali government. The official told reporters on Monday. The official also said under 500 troops will be sent back into the country, but declined to provide a precise number. He emphasized, however, that the Pentagon will not be restoring the full contingent of operators present in Somalia before the previous administration's withdrawal, which was about 750 military personnel. In early 2020, by the way, Trump did withdraw the 750 military personnel from Somalia. But again, you can't just cherry pick what you like to make your argument. You got to take a step back and look at the individual's foreign policy as a whole, and to cherry pick and point to Somalia as an example of Trump being a peace president is insane. By the way, going back to the reporting on what Biden is doing with Somalia, they give a little bit of background in regard to Trump. Trump's decision in December of 2020 to withdraw the US personnel from Somalia was part of a broader effort in the waning days of his administration to pull back US involvement in global conflicts, including Afghanistan and Iraq. But the Biden administration believes that al-Shabaab remains a notable priority given the threat it poses, and that a persistent US presence there will be necessary to counter the group. It's just more of this war on terrorism garbage. And the more the US military intervenes or gets involved in these conflicts, the more we hear about new insurgent groups, new terrorist groups. It's a never-ending cycle. So I don't believe the administration at all that they're like in there to root out terrorism. It never works. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, so we speak to a smart audience, so we tell you things that are easy to comprehend if you got a reasonable level of intelligence. So you say, for example, Obama did drone strikes that were reprehensible because it killed a lot of civilians. In fact, he did drone strikes against American citizens. They were extrajudicial killings. We lost a lot of members, paying members, when we said that. You know why we said it? Because it was true. And no one in the mainstream media was saying because they were protecting Obama. They love Obama because of how establishment he is. And we called out Eric Holder for saying, oh no, we don't need a judicial permission if we target an American abroad. That is an insane ideology, and that is terrible. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat doing it. Okay, so then Trump gets in office, and he's worse. He does more drone strikes, kills more civilians, acts more extrajudicially, and we gave you all those examples, but there's tons more. I mean, that example of killing Soleimani, that risked a massive war with Iran.
Yes.
And by the way, you wanna know why he did it? Because Sheldon Adelson was his top donor and gave him over $100 million. And he had a list of demands: move the capital of Israel. By the way, make sure that unions are not allowed to organize in his casinos, get rid of a corruption charge that he had for things he did in Macau. But one of the list of demands was start a war with Iran. And so Trump does his best by killing their top general to start and provoke a war. And then you go to Russia. They ask him now, how about Russia? He's like, oh, I wouldn't have done it under my watch because I would have been so tough on them. Jimmy, what does so tough on them mean? He would have done the same things that he's always talking about: bombings, the mother of all bombs, and we're so tough, and we're gonna do military. Okay, maybe he wouldn't have done it to Russia, again, for the same economic interest that he didn't do anything about Saudi Arabia. He says, I like making money from Saudis. I like making money from Adelson and the Russians, etc. To call him anti-war, though, is preposterously fake and false. But that's what Jimmy does now. He's such a pathetic figure. But if you think, oh, but Cenk and Anna, maybe he's just an idiot and he got it all mixed up. And remember, he doesn't read anything.
I mean, look, he might be, because he avoided Trump stories like it was the plague during the Trump administration. All he did was focus on Democrats and criticizing them.
It's not an accident. He's sitting there trying to help the Republican Party in every single way while pretending to be a progressive. It's the oldest grift. Dave Rubin did this so long ago, Jimmy. You're a retread. Two unfunny so-called comedians who always have the same one trick pony. That's all they are. So I want to go to the last clip here. This is where he talks about Ron DeSantis. Just so you think, oh, he didn't just make an honest mistake about Trump because he loves Trump so much and he thinks he's so anti-war. Now watch him fillet Ron DeSantis.
And so now look, and now they give a right winger like DeSantis, who should be repulsive to people who are on the left. Now they make him attractive. And how are they doing it? Watch, here's what he says.
But clearly, our entire principles that the country was founded on, you cannot have a ministry of truth in this country. And so let's get real here. Let's make sure that we're doing things to benefit Floridians and Americans, but we're not going to let Biden get away with this one. So we'll be fighting back.
If you're for free speech and civil rights and liberties, who are you going to vote for? This guy or Joe Biden? Tough call though, isn't it?
So what he's referring to there, Ron DeSantis was in that press conference being critical of Joe Biden and the DHS rolling out a disinformation department, essentially, which we were critical of as well on this show. We think it's a bad idea. But if you think Ron DeSantis is a free speech politician, you would be mistaken. In fact, one of the latest moves that Ron DeSantis made was to ban demonstrators from being able to demonstrate in residential areas, to basically prevent protesters from protesting in front of the homes of various people in positions of power, like politicians and judges and things like that.
Yeah.
Real free speech.
Okay. He said they make Ron DeSantis look attractive. No, Jimmy, it's not they. It's you who's trying to make Ron DeSantis look attractive. Mm-hmm. If you leave out the part where he's now talking about banning protesters on public sidewalks, and you leave out the part where he's in favor of a law in Florida that says you're not allowed to criticize Israel, otherwise you'll lose government contracts, and you paint him as a freedom of speech hero when he's the exact opposite, you are trying to make him look attractive. And there's a reason why you're doing that, because now your main job is to fillet Republicans all day long. I hope you're having fun. Guys, there's nothing wrong with criticizing Biden or Obama or the Democrats. We do it all day long. But when you hide the problems of the Republican Party and you falsely try to make them look great like heroes, like anti-war heroes and freedom of speech heroes, when you know for a fact that that's not true, that's lying to your audience on purpose for money like a whore.
In fact, one final thing I'll say about this. Jimmy Dore argued that Biden is worse than Trump because Biden's administration has a DHS that includes something now known as a disinformation board. Again, we're critical of that as well. But then he said that Biden is worse because of that reason and compared Biden to Trump declaring or wanting to declare martial law to squash protesters in front of the White House. He thought that doing that, declaring martial law, would have been far less. It would be better than what Biden is doing now with the disinformation.
Martial law brings imperialism to America.
Yeah, no.
Military rule.
He loves
Look,
it.
I'd call him an idiot, except he's not. He's lying on purpose every single day. He just told you to vote for Trump. Trump said, I don't care who won the goddamn election. He's basically declared that he hates democracy and that he would have put himself in charge even though he knows for a fact he lost the election. And he was considering doing military rule in America. And Jimmy says, oh, vote for him. He's the one who is in favor of democracy. He's the anti-war, he's the one on the left. Look, I don't know who I feel more sorry for. The fact that he's reduced himself to this pathetic creature who makes money off this grift, or his audience who believes obvious lies. For God's sake, look up a fact, okay? Look up any facts. He's obviously lying to you. For the 8 people who think they're on the left that are still there, 98% of his audience is right wing and they love it. They're like, oh, left winger Jimmy Dore, left winger Glenn Greenwald, left winger Dave Rubin. They all agree with us. And there's like 8 schmucks left, like, oh, the left is for Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. If you say so, you guys are a joke.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, already there are signs that the Twitter deal with Elon Musk is maybe not gonna make it. Maybe it's gonna fall through the cracks, we'll see. And later, a right winger who lost it when she came across pro-choice demonstrators. That and more after the break.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk, and I'll see you soon.